Hey everyone, it's the Doomdog. We recently finished another playthrough on the channel, and that means it's time for another review. Today we will be taking a look at Kane and Lynch Dead Men for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC. We played the Xbox 360 version. Let's take a look. For those of you that frequented game forums back in 2007, you may remember that this game is rather infamous. For the uninitiated, however, I will quickly go over what happened. On the day of this game's launch, gaming website GameSpot had a full front page ad for this game on their site. Their review by Jeff Gerstmann went up the same day, and it had a rather negative tone to it. He gave it a score of 6. Shortly after the review went up, he was fired from the site. People put 2 and 2 together, and they figured out that he was probably fired for that review. It caused a huge shitstorm online, and a lot of hate was thrown at this game. We did get Giant Bomb out of the whole thing, so there is that. This begs the question of how good this game actually is. It was review bombed, and that incident certainly left a bad taste in the mouths of a lot of gamers. The game has always had a rather negative reputation as a result of this, but critical reviews of the game in general were not super positive. Is this game overhated, and is it actually decent? Or is it as bad as its reputation seems to suggest? Let's find out. In Kane and Lynch, you play as Adam Marcus, nicknamed Lynch. The game starts off with him narrating a letter that he wrote to his daughter Jenny. He is on death row and is being transported to the place where he will be executed. Among the passengers in the armored police vehicle that he is in is a man named James Seth Lynch. Lynch orders Kane to cover his head, and the vehicle comes to a sudden crash shortly thereafter. When Kane comes to, he is on the streets beside the crashed police vehicle, and a group of criminals are fending off the cops. Lynch uses his shotgun to break Kane's cuffs, and he helps him up. The two of them must escape with help from these criminals that busted them out. Why was Kane busted out of the police vehicle and transported away? Who needs him, and what do they need him for? What role does Lynch play in all this? Why were these characters in prison to begin with, and what will become of Kane's daughter Jenny? There are many questions in store for the players as the story unfolds. The two title characters are an interesting dynamic. In this game, you are not playing good people or even anti-heroes. You are playing hardened criminals. Obviously, Kane must have done something pretty bad in his past to wind up on death row, and Lynch is a psychopath that has blackouts. He takes medication to keep these at bay. Listening to these two talk to each other and bicker is the biggest highlight of the game's story. If you are into crime dramas, that is what you get here with these two. It works, but it's definitely not for everyone. The story does have a few shocking twists as well. There is one moment in particular that left my jaw hanging when I first saw it years ago when I played this game for the first time. I am not going to spoil that here because I do think this is a story worth experiencing for those into this kind of thing. If you are looking for a story that presents genuinely good guys, or perhaps anti-heroes, or bad guys with a heart of gold, however, you are barking up the wrong tree. Kane and Lynch Dead Men does not give a fuck if you like its characters at all. It presents two criminals to you and goes, here they are. You decide what you want to think of them afterwards. This approach does separate this game from the usual type of video game storytelling. Typically, the characters are presented as heroes. Even when they are anti-heroes, they do morally questionable things for a better outcome for the good guys of the story. That is not the case here. These guys start the game as hardened criminals and they end the game as hardened criminals. They go all the way with it too. As an example, most games would highlight violence happening to women to make a point that these actions are bad. That's not how this game rolls. Lynch nonchalantly punches out a woman that you are kidnapping at one point. And there is not a single ounce of regret in either of the two title characters. And why would there be? These are not the normal type of people. They are unquestionably bad guys. All of this leaves Kane and Lynch dead men in a rather unique position of telling a story about the criminal underworld that feels more real as a direct result. It's an interesting angle to tell a story from, and for this game, it does work very well for what it is trying to achieve. From a storytelling standpoint, there isn't much else quite like it where video games are concerned. Having said that, if you do not like a game not really having heroes to cheer for, this game's story will not be for you. All of this is not to say that these characters don't have morals of their own. They certainly do have their own boundaries that they do not like to push past, and they certainly regret it when they do. These are just well beyond what any normal person would have set as boundaries. This is an interesting crime drama starring two characters that you are not supposed to like. I think a lot of people just do not get that, and I think the story is a lot better than people tend to give it credit for. I certainly love listening to these two title characters bicker with each other. Their dichotomy is a fascinating one, and I like it a lot. How does it look then? Well, the game was released in 2007. It was the early HD era. You will have to temper your expectations a little bit when it comes to the graphics. Textures are going to be lower resolution than modern efforts, and there is generally a lower level of detail as well. It's old enough that it is definitely going to show its age. Having said that, look at other games that came out around that time. Gears of War came out on the Xbox 360 the year before this. Ratchet & Clank Tools of Destruction and Uncharted Drake's Fortune came out in 2007 as well. This definitely does not look as good as those do. The game was not even top of the line when it came out. It was not gorgeous even by 2007 standards. What we have here is a fairly middle-of-the-road game for its day. It's not ugly for the time, but it is one of those games that kind of looks like a top-end Xbox or PlayStation 2 game. Think God of War or Chronicles of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay, run at a higher resolution and cleaned up. That's about how it looks. This is true of a lot of early HD era games. Having said that, it does look very clean in general. Even on consoles, the texture work all looks clean and fairly sharp. You are looking at the Xbox 360 version of it here. If you can get the PC version running properly, it will look even sharper than this. This does make it hold up better over time. It does not have a murky, muddy look to it, generally speaking. It's just fairly low detail and low poly by modern standards. I think a lot of that has to do with the game's color palette. This game was right in the middle of the era of gaming where everything was every shade of brown, gray, and black that you could possibly think of, with almost no color outside of that. But this one largely avoids this trap. It looks more colorful as a result and is particularly vibrant when compared to a game like Gears of War. It's not as colorful as Uncharted or Ratchet & Clank though. It does not need to be when you spend a fair amount of time fighting in places such as a construction site and a prison, both of which have a rather industrial look. The animation is nothing too special. Don't expect Naughty Dog levels of wonderful animation here. This doesn't have the gorgeous fluidity that Uncharted did, but it does not look too rigid either. It is good enough that you don't notice it too much, but that also means that it does not stand out either. Nothing holds it back though, so it's good enough, at least for the time. As far as performance goes, it shoots for 30 frames per second. It was a pretty typical goal for most games at that time. Hell, it still is for a lot of console games to this day. Unlike a lot of games from this generation, the frame rate feels rather stable most of the time. It does not seem to have any severe slowdown or any major performance issues. It seems to run fairly well, all things considered. What about the audio then? Well, when you have a narrative that is entirely dependent on a good dynamic between the main characters, you need strong voice acting to sell those characters and their interactions. If you do not buy the two main characters because the voice acting isn't good, the entire story will unravel. The story would not work without good voice acting. Luckily enough, the two main characters are extremely well voiced. Brian Bloom, who has had a lengthy career as a voice actor and writer in both the film industry and in the video game industry, plays Kane, and he does so with an appropriate aggressive bark in his voice and a lot of anger. Lynch is played by Steve Blum, who is also a seasoned veteran of both the film and gaming industry. Both of these have had lengthy careers before and after this game, and it shows in their excellent performances. None of the other characters are given a real spotlight to shine, and there is little room for personality or growth with any of them. Having said that, the rest of the cast hold their own and do their best with what little material they are given. It's not bad material, there just isn't enough of it for them to be all that memorable. This is not their story, it's Kane and Lynch's story. Still, though, the voice work is good across the board. As far as the soundtrack is concerned, the music is used somewhat sparingly in this game, which is just as well since it is drowned out by gunfire from time to time. The mixing here could be a little better if the music was turned up a bit so that you can hear over the carnage on display during the gameplay. When it does pop in, it is usually used for a more serious moment, some somber ones, or to heighten tension of a shootout. What is here is generally pretty good. This tends to have a mix of guitars and darker electronic sounds. If I was to stick a genre to it, I would say that this is industrial, which is fine by me. The darker and more ambient tones of this game work well for the criminal underworld that it presents you with. It is unconventional, just like the storytelling, and it's not ultra catchy. It is less memorable than a lot of other soundtracks as a result, but I do like it a lot. One particular track that really stands out to me is the one that plays every single time you boot the game up. This game has a killer main theme that mixes dark ambient keyboards with a grungy, grimy guitar riff that repeats. It's awesome, and it sets the perfect tone for the game to come. It lets you know from the very beginning that you are entering the dark and ugly world of the criminal underground. What about the sound effects? They're pretty good across the board. Guns sound appropriately loud, and there is plenty of bass if you have a good system for it. There are a lot of environmental noises such as police sirens blaring and explosions going off all over the place, and everything always sounds distinct. It is pretty impressive audio for the time that still holds up fairly well all these years later. Graphically, it looks dated but clean, the voice acting is great, the music is good, The story and the presentation are the best thing about the game, but you run into problems when you start to play the game. What is Kane and Lynch exactly? Well, it is a third-person cover-based shooter, and that is how the vast majority of the gameplay is. There are sections with basic squad commands that you can issue commands to Lynch to. Generally speaking, it's pretty run-of-the-mill. When you run up to cover, you will stick to it. You can peek out from cover to fire at enemies and hop back into it to avoid enemy fire. You can carry a couple of weapons at a time as well as a grenade. You can pick up enemy weapons when they drop them after dying. It's all fairly standard, really. It works well enough to get you through the game. It does have a few unique mechanics. When you run low on ammo, your allies will offer you more. You make your way over to them and get more ammo from them. This works just fine. Furthermore, when you get shot down or your ally goes down, you can use an injection of morphine to get said person back up on his feet. Taking too much of it will cause you to overdose and it will kill you. That is how you get game overs in this game. Well, that or one of your allies can't come to your aid in time and you bleed out. Furthermore, this game has a weapon swap system. If you want a weapon that one of your allies is using, you can go up to him and bring up the weapons menu. From that, you can move his weapon from his ring to yours to switch weapons with him. You can use this to give specific weapons to specific allies as well if you want. I rarely use this feature, and its main benefit would be in swapping weapons when you are playing it co-op. Speaking of co-op, it does have a co-op mode where the second player takes control of Lynch. This is restricted to split screen play only. For some reason, you cannot play co-op over the internet. At least not on the consoles anyway. This is just a very strange design decision. While co-op play is fun, this does work better as a single player game. There are moments where you and Lynch are separated from each other and your only contact with him is over the radio. These moments tend to work better when you can actually see what Lynch is doing for story reasons that I will not get into here. Having said that, the ally AI is brain dead in this game. They will frequently get in your way while you are firing at enemies, and any ally that does not actually have a name will typically run out into the open as soon as you get them and get killed almost immediately. They might as well not exist because of how completely worthless they are. They die so quickly that you can't even use them as a meat shield. Beyond that, the hit detection is extremely wonky. You will put your crosshair right over the enemy and fire repeatedly without actually hitting him sometimes. Other times your aim will be dead on, and there seems to be no rhyme or reason behind why this is. It's just wildly inconsistent and badly needed to be tightened up. Watching your character miss the enemy over and over again and then dying as a result is never fun. It's frustrating. This game also has the same problem with its cover mechanics that seem to plague damn near every single game like it. Cover is sticky. When you approach it, your character will frequently get right into cover whether you want him to or not. You will be trying to move up through the level to get a better vantage point on the enemy, and Kane will just go straight into cover when you did not mean for him to. It is something that you can learn to deal with, but it is a minor annoyance for the full length of the game. This game rises above its problems in the first half by putting the player in truly unique situations. Of course, the game starts off with you being busted out of prison and running from and doing battle with the police. But it has other unique situations, such as running through a nightclub to try to get to its owner to kidnap her, or busting into a prison so you can find a crew and break them out of it. These scenes feature shootouts with cops as large crowds of people run around you and try to escape. There's really nothing else quite like it, and it's exhilarating to the point where I can forgive it of its flaws and have a lot of fun with it. The second half of the game switches locations to Cuba, though. There is a major shift in tone and play style, and it is very strange. All the cool situations and crowd scenes that helped make the first half of the game very cool and memorable are replaced with run-of-the-mill third-person shooter stuff that feels like it came out of a military shooter. They feel like they come out of a completely different game. G-Man Liz proposed a theory about this one, so credit to him for this one. IO Interactive, the developers of this game, who are best known for Hitman, did make a game on the PlayStation 2 called Freedom Fighters that actually was a third-person military shooter. He suggested that these levels were meant for a sequel to the game, and it was canned. They were repurposed for this one. I do not know if this is true, but it would explain why you are suddenly using RPGs to fight military vehicles once you reach the Cuba levels. When you reach these levels, the problems that the game has, such as poor ally AI and suspect hit detection, boil to the surface and become much more strongly apparent. This game is nowhere near as good as it was once you reach this point. It's a shame the mechanics were not tightened up. The second half of this game would be significantly better if these problems were fixed. It would still be a bog standard third-person shooter though, and these levels would need a complete reworking for it to be great from beginning to end. This game does one more thing that is very strange. It does not have a reload button. You heard that right. This third-person shooter released in 2007 does not have a reload button. You still need to reload your weapons, of course. Kane does this automatically, and it is something that you just have to get used to. It's very strange, though. This game does have a nice variety to its environments, however. You will never fight through the same area twice, and it offers up quite a few different areas to fight through. It ranges from nightclub to an industrial prison to thick jungles. It also throws little bits to mix up the gameplay, such as shooting at cops from the back of a van as you try to escape them, and an on-rails shooter segment where you man a mounted machine gun on a jeep. For all of its faults, variety certainly is not one of them. All in all, I really do enjoy half of this game. I push my way through the second half for the sake of the story. The second half works well enough for me to be able to put up with its shortcomings to finish the game. Minus one single plaza that I got stuck at for more than 40 minutes in my playthrough, I don't dread the thought of replaying it. What about replay value then? Well, as I mentioned, it does have co-op play. It is strictly split-screen couch co-op where another person takes control of Lynch. Do not play it this way when you first play through it because it does take away from the story, but it really helps to alleviate some of the frustration caused by the gameplay issues to have someone else there. This is especially true once you reach Cuba. There are also multiple difficulties. It had a cool multiplayer mode as well, but good luck finding a match nowadays. The biggest kicker for a replay value is something that you would not expect from a game like this though. Kane and Lynch Dead Men has two endings. When you reach the level where you finally find and rescue your daughter, you are presented with a choice. Going one way ends the game right there. Going the other way has you go through one final level. You can play through it twice to get both endings if you choose to. It's a nice touch to help determine what kind of man Kane will be at the end of the game. I like it. Look, Kane and Lynch Dead Men is a deeply flawed game. It tells a good story and it tells it well. If you like crime dramas, you will probably like it. It has a good soundtrack that sets a perfect mood for the game. The voice work is great, and the sound effects are pretty good too. Graphically it's dated, but it looks fairly clean. It has good level variety too. You run into the real problems when it comes to actually playing it though. If you cannot deal with things like suspect hit detection, bad enemy AI, and a sharp shift in style for the Cuba levels, I completely understand that. I get why some people might not like this game, but there's a lot of reasons to like it as well. There's a great game hidden in here, and it's a shame that we will never get a third game so that it can reach its true potential. It works well enough that I do enjoy it for what it has to offer though. Just do not prejudge it and give it an honest try. You might wind up liking it too. You can get Kane and Lynch Dead Men for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC. It is pretty damn cheap to get your hands on the console version of this game, and this is the version that I would recommend. The PC version is a royal pain in the ass to get it running properly. It tends to be incredibly jittery and unplayable. And you have to mess around with the human interface devices and device manager in hopes of finding the right combination of enabled and disabled ones to get it running correctly. I messed around with it for about an hour or so before simply giving up and playing it on console instead. You can try it if you want. Good luck if you do. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe down below. If you could share this video, that would help me out a lot as well. Ring the bell to make sure you get notifications from this channel. Have you played Kane and Lynch Dead Men before? If so, did you enjoy it for the flawed game that it is, or was it too flawed for you to enjoy? Let me know in the comments below. Talk to you later, everybody. Doomdog out.
Thou shalt not bow down before any graven image.